What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today I built one of the most expensive Pokemon in the Open Great League, Shadow Diggersby. This Pokemon takes over 500,000 Stardust and a ton of XL candies to build, and because of that, I really hope it's going to be worth it. If you like this kind of content, please make sure to drop a like on the video. It really helps out the channel. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, please make sure to subscribe. But without further ado, let's get into the battles and see what Shadow Diggersby can do. All right, let's get into game number one. Shadow Diggersby in the lead up against a Shadow Kanto Marowak. Very neutral lead matchup here. Battle of the Shadow Ground types. Who is going to win this one? I know I can get debuffs with our Scorching Sands, but it is only a 30% chance, so I can't really bank on that here. But if I can land this charge move, it will do a lot of damage and neutralize this Marowak a lot, so our potential Shadow Vaping on the backline does not have to align into this. We actually do get the attack drop and the no shield, so best case scenario here, our opponent is also throwing a Bone Club. It does almost nothing after that debuff, even though we were both Shadow Pokemon, and in comes an Azumarill save swap. We're going to counter swap in with our Corsola. Astonish plus Nightshade damage is going to add up quite a bit against them, and I know at this point we can tank a player very easily. The next one will come close to knocking us out, especially after the bubble damage, but I know our Corsola right now is looking very safe into our opponent's team. They have a Marowak and an Azumarill, so as long as I keep our Corsola kind of healthy, it's going to be hard for them to take us out. In comes our next Nightshade here. Our opponent does opt to let it go, and we could end up shielding this move, which we are going to do because I want to keep a bit of health and a lot of energy for the backline. Player off does end up drawing a shield here, but if they want to win this match, they're going to have to shield yet again. Honestly, at this point, I have back-to-back Nightshades, so they're going to have to double shield if they want to keep their Azumarill alive. In comes our Nightshade. It does draw a shield here. Our opponent catches the next Nightshade on this Marowak, but keep in mind, they had a lot of energy here, so they're going to have to shield this if they don't want to let that all go to waste. But our opponent just opts to let it go, and what is their backline Pokemon? Are they going to come back in with Azumarill, or are they just going to show us the third right now? What is it going to be? It's actually a Dugong. Honestly, a bit of a tricky Pokemon to see here, but we can reach a Power Gem or even a Nightshade here to try to give them as little energy as possible. We are going to try our best to draw a shield with this attack. We do get the shield, and then we come in with our Shadow Diggersby and force energy from them immediately. Because I was the Shadow here, if I could land that Scorching Sands, it would put them into crunch range, but also forcing all of this energy out very early on is going to be helpful. Now they can't really go for Drill Runs or Icy Winds against our Drapion before we can reach a crunch, and we also have a potential to clear our debuff with that Corsola in the backline. Our opponent is going to instantly throw the charge move here, but they are 5 away from the next charge attack, so as long as they don't debuff us, we are in a very good spot. Even if they do, though, we are going to be able to win this game just with raw charge move spam with our crunches here. In comes the Azumarill. This is not a Hydro Pump. We can survive this attack very easily, farm them all the way down here despite being debuffed, and then go for 2 crunches. I can even clear my debuff now if I want to. First crunch is going to come through. The second one will knock out. Honestly, even if I don't clear my debuff, I probably could win this game, but I'm going to play it safe, swap out. I even get the defense drop there, yeah, so I could have just stayed in there, but that is totally fine. Just playing it as safe as possible, clearing our debuff, and crunch should be more than enough to knock out this Dugong here in the endgame. GG's to our opponent. Very interesting team. Luckily, our Shadow Drapion on the back put in a ton of work. Next team, Shadow Diggersby up against a Dunsparce. This is probably still a very good matchup here. I'm still learning my Shadow Diggersby matchups, though, so it's going to be interesting to see. But our opponent instantly swapping out to a Talonflame save swap. We have our Shadow Drapion with Aqua Tail, but honestly, this matchup is not as comfortable as I'd like it to be, just because they can survive one Aqua Tail before I get a lot of fast move pressure against them, so they will likely draw both shields from me without needing to shield twice themselves. In comes our first Aqua Tail. Does our opponent want to shield this up, or are they just going to let this go? They do opt to let it go, likely going to instantly throw a charge move against us, so we have to shield twice with our Shadow Drapion, which is a little bit uncomfortable. With that said, we are going to get a full farm down. Having a ton of energy on our Shadow Drapion is always a very good thing. I know Dunsparce is likely going to come back in, and they're probably just going to sack it at this point, knowing that Dunsparce would have to face off against that Shadow Diggersby later on. This first crunch does end up landing. The next move is going to be a crunch. Looks like I'm not going to bait here. Crunch should draw either their shield or basically get a knockout at this point, depending on what our opponent wants to do. They do let it go, and I have the Aqua Tail as well, so we can either draw that shield or finally KO this Dunsparce. Our opponent has a decision to make, and they just let all of their energy go, and they're going to bank on their Azumarill to win this game. At this point, though, there's not much they can do. Even Diggersby is not that bad into Azumarill, especially if I can get a debuff. This matchup is completely over, but even if we don't, at this point, we can survive an Ice Beam. We can at the very least get a lot of fast move pressure with our Diggersby, and Scorching Sands will draw a shield. We have some energy on a Shadow Drapion, and we have a full health Galarian Corsola in the backline that our opponent has not even seen yet. We don't get a debuff from that first move here, but our opponent does let us reach another Scorching Sands right before they are going to throw a charge move against us, so this is either going to draw another shield or do a massive amount of chip damage. They do let it go, but look at that. Another one would knock them out here. We don't quite reach it, but we can reach this Fire Punch, which will chip them down even further into range where even Astonish damage could knock them out. Fire Punch does go through, and now our Diggersby taking them all the way into the red Corsola can easily close this one out. GG's to our opponent. All right, next game. Once again, the battle of the Shadow Ground type Pokemon. Marowak on the opposing side. These Mud Saps are going to add up quite a bit. I'm going to once again go for the Scorching Sands, hoping that I can land it and do a massive amount of damage to this Pokemon. Scorching Sands is going to be thrown, and it does connect with the Marowak. This time, no attack drop, though, so let's see how this is going to change things. First, Bone Club going to come through. This is not debuffed. It's going to do quite a bit more damage than last time, and it will put me into range, at least very close to range, where the next Bone Club will knock us out. I will no-shield it, though, but this is looking a little bit more awkward than that first time. In comes the Bone Club, and it does actually KO our Shadow Diggersby here. I try to go for a farm down, but they instantly swap out to their Shadow Drapion. This is looking so bad for us. I don't really have a pivot to a Shadow Drapion safe swap here once my Diggersby is gone, so I just have to stay in, take this crunch, try to draw a shield with this Power Gem, and maybe I can make something happen with our Shadow Drapion on the back line. With that said, they did save a lot of HP on their Marowak still. I'm going to force them to throw energy with our Corsola, and hopefully we're going to be able to just overfarm with our Shadow Drapion later on and maybe win this game. I might even be able to draw another shield with Corsola if I can reach another Power Gem here. Our opponent does let us reach this, which either is going to get a knockout or come very close, or maybe draw a shield. Power Gem is going to land, and our opponent unfortunately does survive, and in the backline going to be a Dugong here. We have to keep in mind there is still a Marowak with a decent amount of health. We can't farm that down with the Poison Sting damage that we have with our Shadow Drapion, so we are going to have to try our best to whittle down this Dugong. Maybe I can make a catch later on, but I think at this point they are just going to outpace me a little bit too much right now. Icy Wind likely going to be thrown, but I have to shield this up, or else I would just get fast move farm down. And comes the next charge move from our Shadow Drapion, but since that attack drop did happen, I probably don't even knock them out with this. In comes the crunch, but our opponent likely no shield, saving the shield for that Marowak, and at that point, not much I can do. GG's to them. Next matchup here is Shadow Diggersby up against the Shadow Annihilate. Alright, that is terrible to see. I am kind of ABA weak to this. Shadow Drapion is definitely not a Pokemon you want to swap in down energy to an Annihilate, but it's a Pokemon that at least has a little bit more play than our Shadow Diggersby does into this, so I'm going to land the crunch, maybe get a lot of damage into them, or maybe draw a shield. We actually get a shield, which is probably for the best, because I know that we wouldn't one-shot them there. We don't get the attack drop, or defense drop rather, which would have been kind of nice, but we do no-shield the Rage Fist as well, which means we can survive, get to another crunch, and either get a massive amount of damage into them, or get their second shield. Our opponent is going to opt to double shield their Annihilate, actually, which is fine by me, but it is a little awkward because they have a lot of health. They're kind of outside of range where a Scorching Sands could knock out even from a Shadow Diggersby here, so I want to get one or two more Astonishes in. Maybe they just stay in this matchup too. If they do, we might have a chance. Our opponent instantly swaps out to a Shadow Quagsire. Actually, this is looking kind of awkward. I have no idea what the final Pokemon would be, and these Shadow into Shadow Aquatails are going to do so much damage. In the past, when you're using the normal Diggersby, you can actually survive two Aquatails just barely, but the Shadow Aquatail is doing way more damage here, especially the Mud Shots are adding up very quickly, so I will be forced to shield this attack up, but we also have Shadow Scorching Stance. How much damage is that going to do to this Quagsire? Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be quite enough, because Quagsire is decently bulky, but I did want to have as much energy as possible, just in case they do come back in with that Annihilate. I have to shield this up if I want to keep my energy, and at this point I will. I think that Diggersby could have some more play in the backline. Aquatail does get shielded, and our opponent does have that Annihilate in the back, but we have no idea what the third Pokemon's going to be. In comes the Annihilate here. This Scorching Sands might not be enough to knock out. I hope that it is, but I don't think it will be quite enough here, so I'll have to come back in with a Corsola and hope for the best. This is not looking great, though. It's going to be a Shadow Feraligatr here in the backline. This Pokemon has super effective Shadow Claw damage against our Corsola. It has Hydro Cannon, which is very strong into our Diggersby, but we outpace to the Nightshade, actually, and our opponent gets almost put down into Quick Attack range. There is a very small chance I can win this. I have to go for a Quick Attack down against this Diggersby, or against this Feraligatr with their Diggersby, and I need to be able to reach a Fire Punch here against the Annihilate. I just barely do. Fire Punch should be more than enough at this range to knock out and somehow overturn this backline and win this game. GG's to our opponent. That was a very close matchup. Our next game, an Alolan Sandslash in lead. Very awkward stuff here. I do have a Corsola in the back that is pretty neutral into this, but I also have a Shadow Drapion that's very bad into this matchup. So I'm going to just stay in here, go for these Fire Punches, and hopefully draw shields. Our opponent instantly throws the move here. This is going to do quite a bit of damage to us, but I know I survive it because even though we're Shadow, it is only an Ice Punch, not the strongest move in the game, and it's only from a non-Shadow A-Slash. In comes our Fire Punch. We actually draw a shield with that, which is kind of interesting. I wasn't really expecting a shield that early on from our opponent, but because they do end up shielding that move, I'm just going to take shield advantage on our Shadow Drapion in the backline and hope for the best. Ice Punch does end up knocking us out here, but I can come in with our Corsola, try to neutralize this A-Slash, and once this is out of the way, I'm hoping this is their best answer to Shadow Drapion, but there could always be a Mud Slapper in the back. Maybe it's going to be that double Mud Slap team. If that is the case, that's even worse for us right now, but Ice Punch does not quite do that much damage, and we can reach a Nightshade here just a second after. Nightshade will do a lot of damage, so I don't think it's quite enough to knock them out from this range. No, it is not, but Astonish is going to finish them off before they can reach another charge move. Our opponent's thinking for just a second here. They come in with an Azumarill. A Pokemon is very neutral for a Corsola to see, and it is a little awkward, though, because we are in range where we probably get knocked out by Bubbles plus Play Roughs, so I'm going to try to whittle this down so our Shadow Drapion has a better time, but Shadow Drapion is going to have a lot of work to do. There's a chance I survive this charge move, but I also know at this point just 2 Shield Drapion is my win condition. Our opponent gets a little greedy, goes for the Ice Beam. I'm going to save the energy on Corsola, but unfortunately they swap out at the same exact time as we do into an Annihilate. If I would have stayed in and just throw that Nightshade instantly, I think I might have had a chance here, but this is going to give them a huge opportunity to just overfarm, get a ton of energy on this Annihilate. I'm going to have to try our best here with Shadow Drapion to win this matchup. Aqua Tail going to come through, our opponent is going to let it go. I need to get to 2 more Aqua Tails if I want any chance here. I might actually be able to reach both Aqua Tails. It's going to be very close though, depending on what our opponent does. I don't think the Aqua Tail even quite knocks out yet, though. That's a big problem here. If Aqua Tail cannot KO, then I think they might have us. Aqua Tail is going to come through. Our opponent does opt to let it go, unfortunately, but we save energy on Drapion. Is that going to be helpful at all? I don't think so. I think this Azumarill is just a little bit too healthy. If I had Sludge Bomb, then maybe, but I was a little bit too low on HP to finish off that endgame. GG's to them. All right, next game, the Azumarill in the lead up against our Shadow Diggersby. A terrible lead matchup for us here, but Shadow Drapion is going to be our safe swap. Hopefully, it's going to put in a lot of work. Our opponent is going to opt to throw a move instantly, so I know this is just an Ice Beam, but I know that shielding Shadow Drapion always is going to have a lot of play in the back line. Our opponent swapped out into their own Shadow Drapion, which honestly, up this much energy, that's not that bad for me. Aqua Tails are going to basically two-shot them at this point, and we are not quite in range where we are going to get knocked out by 1 Aqua Tail, so I am going to be able to flip this matchup or get a shield advantage depending on how this is played out. In comes their Aqua Tail here. We are at back-to-back. We're almost at 3 Aqua Tails, actually, so I'm going to throw 1 here. If they shield this, I'll throw back-to-back. If they no-shield, I guess we'll play it by ear. We can farm down. Our opponent does opt to shield that move up. I have back-to-back, and they CMP'd us, which means that now, if this knocks out, we have 1 switch advantage. Aqua Tail does end up landing, but the shield comes up here, unfortunately, so our opponent actually is going to be able to force us to throw, once again, 1 more Aqua Tail, but we have that next Aqua Tail loaded up right now. I'm going to try to get as low as possible, so we give a little bit less farm to whatever is going to come in, but we have successfully flipped switch advantage here. Drapion does go down. Probably the Azumarill is going to come back in here, but I'm fine with that. As long as our Corsola gets to align into it, it's not like the energy is going to go too far, and the Poison Sting damage honestly is stripping them down quite a bit. Corsola is going to be able to wall this energy once again. Hydro Pump would potentially be scary here, but our opponent instantly top left. I guess they're weak to our Shadow Diggersby in the backline, but we'll never know. All right, next game, a Gastrodon in the lead. Not terrible, but honestly, a very neutral lead matchup here. They could have Water Pulse as well, which could be a very surprising move, but Scorching Sands is going to do a lot of damage to them if they do end up letting it go. Our Shadow Drapion is very happy not to be in this matchup. Our Corsola would probably rather be here just because they are forced to go for straight Earth powers against us if they want to knock us out. They can't really body slam Beta Corsola as much, but they also just go straight Earth power here, so I guess that's fine as well. And in comes a very awkward Pokemon. Is that a Shadow Wolverine or was that just a regular one? Either way, this Pokemon is a pick we don't have a hard answer to, but we do draw a shield here and we get a debuff with that Scorching Sands, which is massive. I don't know how I was going to take this out without a shield, so it's a good thing to see that. Honestly, I guess the Scorching Sands Shadow into Shadow would probably do about half of their health anyway, so we can just Astonish down after the fact, but either way, we're trying to whittle this down with our Corsola. Because of that debuff, these Icicle Spears not doing all that much damage to us, and we are already at either a Power Gem or a Nightshade, depending on what we want to throw. Nightshade at this point would be very close to knocking them out, or at least putting them into fast move farm down range, and so I'm just going to throw it here. Our opponent does opt to no-shield it, and we can Astonish down, getting just a bit more energy for whatever is going to try to farm down our Corsola. It might be the Gastrodon that comes back in. It might be, honestly, a triple, I was going to say a triple water team, but no, in comes the Talonflame here. That is by no means a water-type Pokemon, but at this point, once we get this fast move pressure and draw the shield, our Shadow Drapion should be able to close out this game. We can go for an Aqua Tail here. If that Gastrodon ever comes back in, they're not going to be able to reach another charge move against our Drapion before we can throw a Crunch against them, so we should be able to win this endgame matchup. In comes the Gastro, but all I have to do here is throw a Crunch over from just a little bit so I can outpace that Talonflame to a charge move, and we should be totally fine. Even if we can't really knock them out with an Aqua Tail here, we still have a Corsola and a Shadow Diggersby around that can finish the job with fast moves after the fact. They can't farm us down, though, before Poison Sting down is going to happen, so there's no way I think that this Talonflame can close out this endgame. We get the full Poison Sting down, Shadow Drapion winning us the match there. Alright, next game, Shadow Diggersby up against a Wigglytuff. Going to be an interesting matchup here. I know that normally Diggersby has a very strong matchup here, so if the Shadow is better or worse, I guess we'll find out. In comes our first Scorching Sands. This could get a debuff, but I'm not banking on it right now, but Scorching Sands from a Shadow Diggersby would put a decent amount of damage into this Wigglytuff. Our opponent does opt to no-shield it, and they get debuffed here, which is absolutely fantastic. It's great as well that our Corsola gets to avoid this matchup, knowing that we would not want to use Ghost-type damage into this normal-type Pokemon. Icy Wind does come through, it gets the debuff against us, so I will have to throw another Scorching to guarantee the debuff or the knockout right now against them. They do opt to let it go, and now what's going to come in? It's actually going to be a Corviknight, which is kind of interesting. I can reach a Fire Punch here, but this is going to be a bit of a nasty farm down they might be able to get against me. I don't know if I want to let this happen. Fire Punch is going to end up landing, but at this point, I know that Corsola should have a decent matchup into this, so I can still just let that go and come in Corsola, sponge all the energy we need to, and hope that our Shadow Drapion in the backline is going to have some play. In comes a charge with hopefully no payback. It is going to be a Sky Attack, fortunately, but that does do a decent chunk of damage. These Sand Attacks, though, doing absolutely nothing to Corsola right now. We can survive this next charge move and go for a Nightshade in just a second. Iron Head is going to be thrown as their second charge move. I guess they do need 3 moves to knock us out, so it makes sense to go for the cheaper move on the second throw. In comes our Nightshade. Our opponent does opt to shield it up, and at this point, I think our Shadow Drapion in the backline is going to be able to close out this game. It's going to be their own Corsola in the back, which is not exactly that scary to see. We have Crunch, which is super effective, although the one awkward thing about this is we can't one-shot them with a Crunch from this range. We need 2 charge moves here, and Poison Stings are never going to do too much fast pressure to this Corsola. In comes the Crunch. Our opponent is likely going to have to shield this up, but if they do shield, I could get a debuff, so they actually opt to let it go, which also makes sense. But now I'm at back-to-back Aqua Tails here. All I have to do is throw one Aqua Tail and then throw immediately on the second one, knock out this Corsola before they can get to another charge move. In comes the next Aqua Tail. Our opponent not even throwing a charge move here, so at this point the game is over. We have a shield left over, and we have a ton of health left over on both our Corsola and on our Shadow Drapion. The Corviknight does come back in here, but we can just shield this up, go for a Crunch, knock out the Steel-type Pokemon, and we should be able to close out this endgame. Iron Head does draw a shield, but that's totally fine. Crunch should be more than enough to take them out from this range, even if it's not. Corsola is still sitting in the backline with a lot of fast food pressure left over. GG's to them. Alright, next game, the Shadow Dragonite lead. Very bad lead matchup for us to see, but honestly, after the Quick Attack and Fire Punch changes here, we were able to actually do quite a bit of fast food pressure into them. I know that Quick Attack has a decent amount of fast food pressure, unlike the Mud Shot that Diggersby used to use, and I know that Fire Punch as well is going to chunk them down into a range where the next one could knock them out. I'm going to no shield, hoping that they don't go for a superpower here. Dragon Claw does not quite knock us out, but they do full send, unfortunately, which knocks out a lot of our HP on our Diggersby and all of our energy that we have left. I'm going to come in with their Shadow Drapion, try to go for a full Poison Sting down, and unfortunately they are just barely able to reach a charge move here at the last second before we can farm them down. Dragon Claw does draw a shield, but we get a nice farm down out of that matchup. In the backline, going to be a Gastrodon. Unfortunately, that is not what we want to see here. This Pokemon has a lot of play into our Shadow Drapion, and they are up shields. This is looking terrible for us right now. In comes a charge move, likely going to be an Earth Power, but I was able to CMP the Nightshade, which should do quite a bit of damage to them, maybe even draw shields from them, and they have stayed in here, so maybe there's a chance we have some play in the back. Nightshade is going to come through. Our opponent opts to shield up the attack, and in comes a Toxapex, a Pokemon that we have a lot of play with most of our team, but at this point, we are so low on our Corsola that we might be in Brine range plus Poison Jab damage, and we are also so low on our Shadow Drapion that a Brine is going to start drawing shields from us there as well. In comes our Nightshade, does not even put them below half health. Toxapex is so insanely bulky. They're able to survive this, get a Brine off, and I can swap out, but at this point, I need a ton of energy if I want any chance to win this game. I think the Gastrodon is outside of range where I can knock them out with a Crunch as well, so I think this game might just be done for us right now. We get the defense drop, but even with that defense drop, there's no way we're going to Poison Sting this down in time. Our opponent's Switch Clock is back up in just a second here. Brian is going to draw our shield, but in comes the Gastrodon at this point. Yeah, they're so healthy. Only way I win this is if they shield this up, I get a Crunch debuff, and I can reach another Crunch before Body Slam. They do let that go, though, which is so unfortunate. We got the debuff as well, so if they would have shielded that, we might have had a chance here, but they played it very well. They end up just shielding the proper moves here. I try to make a catch or swap out disconnect and down with a fast move, but we can't even do that. This Gastrodon is able to just fast moves all the way down. All right, next matchup here. This is an interesting matchup. Corviknight up against Shadow Diggersby. The Fire Punches are going to do a lot more damage to them, but the Sand Attacks do 2 damage per turn to us as well. So a very fast-paced matchup here. Fire Punch likely going to be able to 2-shot them after the quick attack damage, but the Sand Attacks are going to put me into double Sky Attack range a lot sooner. Our opponent throwing a charge move. Is it going to be a Sky Attack or an Iron Head or maybe a Payback here? Oh, they actually go for an Iron Head. That's interesting. And then they instantly swap out to a Dugong. We have a Corsola, which is a decent answer to this, but it's not going to be a hard wall to the energy. If they want to start brute forcing their way through this matchup, they can. They're going to debuff us before we can get off a Power Gem, unfortunately, but that's just the way this matchup works. In comes the first Icy when we are debuffed here. I can reach a Power Gem, though, and this is still going to do quite a bit of damage despite being at -1. Power Gem is going to be thrown. Our opponent likely has to make a decision. Do they want to shield this up? They actually do, which does make a little bit of sense, knowing that they are going to be able to debuff me a second time before taking even a single Power Gem. They're going to take a lot less damage from this next charge move. Power Gem does come through here, but I am double debuffed. It's going to do almost no damage to them, and they are going to be able to build up a lot of energy if I just let them farm us down. I'm going to swap out here instead into our Shadow Diggersby. I don't quite reach the Scorching Sands, but we can reach this Fire Punch, which from a Shadow Diggersby is going to do quite a bit of damage to them. Fire Punch does end up landing. Our opponent is able to survive and reach an Icy Wind, which is a little bit unfortunate for us, but we can just come in with our Shadow Drapion, get an energy lead, or they don't even knock us out actually with that. They get the energy lead on Charjabug, which is probably the worst case scenario actually for us, but this is still fine. I have my Corsola in the backline if I need it for some fast food pressure. I have Shadow Drapion with 2 shields, and we can try to shield our way through this matchup. In comes the first X-Scissor. It's not going to do that much damage to us because we have the shield, obviously. The next shield is likely going to have to be used against the next X-Scissor, though. I can't take that damage because I know at that point we just get fast moved down by the Corviknight. Crunch does end up actually drawing a shield there. I was expecting that to land, because if they would have got debuffed, that would have put them well into range where I could knock them out with the next crunch. But because they are making the call where they did not get debuffed here, I am not able to knock out the charge buff just yet. In comes the Corviknight. This is going to be a very interesting endgame here. Crunch is going to be able to almost knock out the Corviknight, but they have a lot of energy on this thing. I'm going to swap to our Corsola to try to snipe them down. We are able to. We also bank a Crunch, so this game's going to come down to a potential catch by our opponent here. I don't think their switch clock's going to be up, though, at least not just yet. So maybe as long as I can put them into range where we can knock them out with a Crunch, we might be able to win this matchup. Our opponent does throw energy here, but that's fine. I can win CMP with our Crunch on our Shadow Drapion. No catch is able to happen. This is going to knock them out, and we should be able to Poison Sting down the rest of that Dugong. Crunch ends up landing. Our opponent has Dugong in the backline, but they're in one Poison Sting range, able to close out the game there. Shadow Diggersby in the next game up against a Shadow Drapion. This is a matchup that honestly the Shadow Diggersby does struggle a little bit against, but our opponent instantly swaps out here to a Shadow Feraligatr. This is a Pokemon I don't have a great answer to as a safe swap, so I'm just going to have to no shield a Hydro Cannon. It's going to do a lot of damage Shadow into Shadow, but I'm still not in range where I can get fast move down just yet. But we are going to be kind of worried right now of that Shadow Drapion in the backline now that our Shadow Diggersby has been chipped down so much. We did get a nice bait off there, but at this point we are in such an awkward spot depending on their final Pokemon, because I don't know how I'm going to take out that Drapion later on this game. I'm going to have to shield up this Hydro Cannon. It would do a lot of damage into us. We might be able to survive it just barely, but I don't want to risk that. Crunch is going to come through. Our opponent likely has to shield this up if they want to survive. Crunch is going to draw their shield, which is interesting. Now they're in range where an Aqua Tail might be able to knock them out after a bit more Poison Sting damage, so we'll see if they end up staying in this matchup. Our opponent actually swaps back out, though, into the Shadow Drapion, which is good for me. I needed to be able to knock this out somehow, so potentially by knocking them out with double Aqua Tail, this could be good for us. Aqua Tail number 1 is going to come through here on CMP, it looks like. Next Aqua Tail is loaded up on our Shadow Drapion. We could throw it right now if we want to. Our Shadow Drapion is going to end up saving the energy, though, going for a Fire Punch with our Diggersby. I feel like this is probably the best use I'm going to get out of Diggersby left this game. Fire Punch is able to nearly knock them out, not quite, but they're in range where we can either go for a Poison Sting or an Astonish down against them and maybe have a chance against their final Pokemon. They already showed 2 Pokemon very strong against our Corsola. I just have to hope that the third is not also strong against us. In the back is going to be an Azumarill Pokemon we have a lot of play into. Crunch is likely going to land against this Pokemon and do... I actually got a debuff here, which is kind of nice, but it's not going to be able to let us get to another Aqua Tail here, which is a little bit unfortunate. But in comes that Shadow Feraligatr. This thing has a little bit more HP than I remember. Luckily, we are able to reach this this Nightshade here, but Azumarill has a lot of energy. Those Shadow Claws have done quite a bit of fast food pressure against us. I think if they can reach 2 charge moves against our Corsola before we're able to reach 2 Nightshades, they're going to be able to win this game. And I think at this point, that's what's going to happen. Player rep number 1 already reached. I'm nowhere near 2 Nightshades. I just barely reached the first one, which means that they can throw a charge move here, knock out our Corsola, and unfortunately just barely not able to close out this game. GG's to our opponent. Very well played. That was such an awkward team to face. All right, next game, what are we going to see? Shadow Diggersby up against the Shadow Jumpluff, actually. Very neutral matchup here. I have Fire Punch, which is super effective in Shadow into Shadow. I would imagine it comes close to 2-shotting. I also expect that I would survive an Energy Ball from this thing because it is not going to have a lot of fast food pressure against us, and Energy Ball is not exactly the highest damaging nuke out there, so I think I'm going to try our best to brute force our way through this matchup. In comes the first charge move. I know that we would be able to survive this, but I don't want to risk it. I want to take a lot of damage just in case we have a lot of play with our Diggersby in the backline. But yeah, these Fire Punches are doing a lot of damage to Jumpluff here. Fire Punch number 2 has been queued up. Our opponent is going to shield it up as well, and at this point, I don't think I want to double shield our Diggersby because I know our backline, sometimes especially our Shadow Drapion, would like shields. In comes the Energy Ball. We are actually going to be able to straight up win the 1-shield matchup, landing this next Fire Punch. Are we going to draw a shield from them, or is this just going to get a knockout? Our opponent does end up letting it go. What are they going to do? They come in with a Shadow Feraligatr. This is so scary. This Pokemon Up Energy is a very threatening Pokemon to have into our backline, but what we do have is a Scorching Sands ready to go. Maybe I can get a debuff here. If I can, there might be a chance for us. Scorching Sands ends up getting a shield and a debuff, which is exactly what we need to see. They are debuffed right now. This is the only opportunity I'm going to have to no-shield a debuff move, so I'm going to no-shield this attack. It does a lot of damage, and in the backline going to be a Gastron here. A little bit slow on that counter swap here into my Corsola, though. I take a lot of damage on our Shadow Drapion, but we can reach this charge move against this Gastron before they're able to reach an Earth Power. Nightshade should do a decent chunk to them, but we have to keep in mind there is still that Shadow Feraligatr in the backline, which is going to be a very threatening Pokemon to see. In comes a charge move here. Earth Power is going to do a lot of damage, but we can survive it. Water Pulse as well. I guess that's an interesting play here. And our opponent able to get to yet another charge move here. I'm going to shield this up. I know I have a Nightshade loaded right now on our Corsola. We should be able to land it against this Feraligatr and do quite a bit of damage to them. In comes the Nightshade. This should be able to either put them into fast move farm down range or just get the knockout. Our opponent, though, calls the combo play. Hold on, did I just find a way to throw this game? I might have. In comes the Hydro Cannon here. Unfortunately, that does end up knocking us out, and it's a Simul. We should have just not even swapped out there. We would have won that one. A very good play by our opponent to call the combo play. All right, next game here, the Gastron in the lead. Once again, this is where I want to see it. I don't want it against our Shadow Drapion. My Corsola, though, would probably be the better matchup just because they can't really bait Body Slams here. But I know that these Scorching Sands, if they end up landing, will do a lot of damage to this Ground-type Pokemon. In comes the Scorching Sands. Our opponent does let it through, and now we have some decisions to make. Do we want to call a bait or shield up a potential nuke? I'm going to let it go. I know I might survive this attack, and it could be a Body Slam bait. We do know shield a Body Slam, and in comes a Diggersby of their own. This is so bad for us. Diggersby is normally going to be our answer to their Diggersby, and for some reason they're running AVA Ground-type Pokemon. They are so weak to a Grass type in the lead, but we're going to have to just try our best here to whittle this thing down, maybe go for another Fire Punch to see if we can chip them down even more. I thought they tried to CMPS there. I could have actually reached for another Scorching Sands, but this is fine. We've kind of put them into Aqua Tail range potentially, but they are overpowering so much here. I'm going to go for the catch here on our Corsola because at this point they're kind of debuffed, and I know that Diggersby, the only reason this matchup is good for them is because they resist our fast moves and our charge moves. So as long as they're not doing a lot of damage to us and we're not doing a lot of damage to them, like that's not the worst case scenario here. Scorching Sands number 2 does come through. That's a double debuff on Scorching Sands. That is not what you want to see here as the Corsola. We're going to try our best though to overperform as much as we can. They throw yet another charge move against us. It's going to be able to put us kind of low, but not enough to knock us out just yet. This next charge move is going to be thrown, but we are double debuffed once again. Corsola is going to try its best here, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to knock out this Diggersby. In comes a Power Gem. Not even close. These debuffs absolutely costing us right now. In comes another charge move. I might be able to survive the Scorching Sands at this range. Our opponent, though, going for a Fire Punch instead, and our Shadow Drapion is going to try its best to farm them down. They end up swapping out to their Gastron. Unfortunately, once again, this is such a bad matchup to be in. I know that Aqua Tail is going to be able to draw a shield potentially. They do shield it up, actually, which means they might be kind of weak to our Shadow Drapion in the backline, but I don't know what I can do at this point. They can just 2-shield Mud Slap me all the way into range, where they could potentially knock me out just with fast moves on my whole team. What can I do right now? What could be in the back that we could have any chance of beating? We have a little bit of energy on our Corsola, we have a little bit of energy on our Diggersby, but we have no HP across the board. They come in with their Diggersby of their own, and it's going to be a Shadow Drifblim. Hold on. We have a Nightshade loaded. I think after landing this Fire Punch, they're going to be in Nightshade range. We might be able to combo play them here, somehow win this game out of nowhere. That's crazy. Corsola able to come in, go for the Nightshade, one-shot the remaining health on the Shadow Drifblim, and take us the win there. Good games. I didn't think there'd be much that I could have a chance against, but I guess that would be one of the only things I could have beat. So Shadow Diggersby, honestly, it's not the best Pokemon from what I can tell. This thing is way squishier than the regular Diggersby, and honestly, the extra damage doesn't really help it out a lot. If you have a Diggersby, just keep on using the regular form. Shadow Diggersby was fun, but it definitely doesn't seem like that big of an upgrade. Well, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel a lot. Thank you again for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.